Hello everyone. Very good evening. Can someone please confirm if I'm audible?
Yes, sir.
Thanks. All right. So what we did in the previous session, so we did implement caching using Flask Cache in the last session on Saturday. So today, what we are planning to do is, so we just want to walk you through the activity and practice-based questions for the previous 2 weeks. Previous 2 weeks for week 12, I guess there are no activity or practice-based assignments as of now. So we'll be taking those for weeks 10 and 11. And if time permits, maybe we can discuss a few things for week 12 as well. But yeah, that's going to be the agenda for today's session. Well, before we get started, I just want to know that how your project preparations are going on.
It's in initial stage.
It's still in initial stage.
Okay. Yes.
So when are you planning to submit your project?
I will be taking around a month at least.
A month from now.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so means if I try to compare the core requirements of the project with the contents that we have covered in the live sessions, is there anything else that is left that we have not covered so far?
Not exactly like that, sir. It's quite sufficient. We just want to how to put it together and test it integrated system. That will be a big task. That will be a big task. Yes.
Okay. Okay. What about others? How's your project preps?
Sir, I am also going to start.
Okay. Okay. Anyway, so looks like still many of you are going to start. We have not started yet. Okay, so how many of you have already gone through the Viva guidelines that are released for this term students? I hope you must be aware of the procedure this time.
Yes, sir. There is a plagiarism check for code as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Any idea about the submission? How the submissions are going to take place this term?
Yeah, that is, I think, in 2 levels. First level, if we are going to clear, then we
no,
are
I'm talking about submissions. I'm not talking about level 1 and level 2 Vivas. Like,
okay.
What's the deadline to submit your final project and when your Viva is going to be scheduled eventually?
So in final project section, that part is not provided, I think. We got one section in our portal, that is final project. And there are a few tabs over there, but so, that schedule is not shared there.
Actually, we have released a detailed Viva guidelines document. I'm not sure if you got a chance to go through that document. Yes, we released that document a few days ago.
Sir, is it released in
project
where it is released? Project portal. So in project course portal, it's not visible. I think I need to check it again. Just a moment.
Yeah, so this guidelines for the project is what I'm referring to.
Yeah, that is a short intro and problem statement 30 seconds. That part, no, sir. Project presentation guidelines are there.
Okay, basically, the new submission criteria that deadline will be open, or basically the project submission would be open from August 1st and will go on till September 30th.
So here it is written, submission link will release soon. The first set of submission will be accepted from the latter half of July and the start of the month of August.
Which document you are referring to, Chandrasekhar?
So in our portal, we got one new tab, that is final object, final project, and under that qualified self app application V2. This is mentioned over there.
Okay, so are you able to see my screen? I have shared
Just
my
a
screen.
moment. Yes, sir. No,
So I'm
this is
also on the
not
project.
visible. On our end, this is not visible. It is giving 2-3 more lines.
So can you
Maybe it
just
is
check the
not
URL?
updated.
Can you check this URL?
Just a moment, sir.
I would request all others in the meeting as well to please double check the URL as well.
NS_22T2 CS 2006. Yes, sir. It's same.
2006 P is also there.
No, we got only 2006.
No, you need to append P in order to access the project portal. So you must have received the emails to access your project course portals a few weeks ago.
Yeah, now that's visible, sir.
So there is a guidelines for the project
Yes.
document. That's what I'm referring to here. Okay, so I hope you got to know where that document is.
Yes,
If
sir.
somebody is planning to not complete the project this time, yes, they would be required to complete the project of the next term in case they decide to do so. Anyone who does not submit by September 30th, yes, they will be required to do the project of the next term, even in the.
Sir, what will be the second slot of submission?
Sorry, second slot of submission. I didn't get it.
I think there will be 2-3 slots for submission, like we discussed before.
I'm not getting it. What do you mean by slots of submission?
We have to choose a submission slot like that. There was earlier an email.
Okay, so see, what is going to happen is the deadline or the submission link would be activated from August 1st onwards. It will be open till September 30th. Now it depends on you when you want to submit your project. So let's say if you submit on 1st of August itself. So what we'll be doing is we will be processing all of the submissions every Monday. So let's say you submit on 1st of August. So what day is on 1st of August? I guess it is Monday.
Yeah.
So what we'll do is we will on 8th of August, that means after 1 week, we'll extract all of the submissions that have been submitted so far, means between 1st and 7th, and we'll start processing them. No, we'll do all of the processes that are mentioned in the document, like validation checks, plagiarism checks, and all. And once the submission passes all of those things, then the person or those who pass those tests would be eligible for level 1 Viva. After passing level 1, you would be eligible for level 2 Viva as well. Similarly, the submission link will be, of course, since it is still open, so the next set of submission would be processed on 15th of August. That means the submissions which are made in between 8th of August and 14th of August. They will be extracted and processed from 15th of August onwards. So the early you submit your project, the early you will be getting your Viva done, or you will be completing your course in case you satisfy all of the criteria.
I think most of the students will be waiting for the end-sem exam to get finished.
Yeah,
that may be the case. Yeah, probably. And after that, you can see then submission will start. Maybe that's my thinking.
Okay, so what you're saying is that there may be null submissions in the first week.
Till 7th of August, I think.
Yeah,
I'm not sure, but just I'm thinking that way.
Okay. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to make you all aware that you can refer to this document. So you basically didn't get that link, this course portal URL in some of the emails. I saw one of the announcements being sent a few weeks ago, I guess.
I think we received it, but in portal it was not showing up. There was an email. I gone through it.
Okay. Yeah, so you just need to append P in the theory course URL.
Now, yes, sir, now got it.
Okay. So this is the document, ticket document. You can refer to it and let us know in case of any issues. All right. So we'll start with what we have planned then. So we'll start with week 10 questions. I hope every one of you would have at least gone through the week 10 and 11 lectures by now. Okay, so we'll start with the AQ 10.1 category, and the very first question, or even the first couple of questions, are based on lightweight API calls. So lightweight API calls are very much relatable to webhooks as well. So what usually happens here is that a server, generally gives endpoints that are meant for receiving the data, or that are meant for pushing the data to those endpoints. That means whatever endpoints have been given by the developer or a particular application, these endpoints should be required in order to push some data to that application. And of course, if you are pushing some data, it is probable that the request method is going to be post in general. Of course, it is possible that you can even transfer some data using GET request as well, but that is not preferable as it has many security implications. So what happens in lightweight API calls is the requests are usually sent through GET method. That is not a true statement. They are swift and work with minimal payload. So what happens is that, of course, as I have mentioned, means if you are pushing some data to an application, you would be preferring a post over GET. But again, the payload that you are basically submitting with a request, it should be minimal in case of lightweight API calls. Okay. And of course, they are swift, they are fast. Endpoints exposed are meant to push messages, as I have already mentioned that we are not interested in getting the information from those endpoints, but we are interested in pushing some information to those endpoints that are exposed by a developer or an application. So they are swift, and endpoints exposed are meant to push messages. The first option is not true, since we are saying that we are pushing some information. So that generally happens using post. Sorry. The next question is also based on a similar concept. So the server exposes an endpoint on which it can receive messages. Yes. So if you're saying that you're basically pushing some information on those endpoints, so at least if you think it from the application point of view to which you are making the request, then from that application's perspective, it is receiving, it is collecting some data. Other services can retrieve the messages from this endpoint. Again, we are saying that we are pushing some information, so they are not meant for retrieval. So that is a false option. We just need to select true here. Our requests are usually made through the post method. So I guess this made is missing here. So in the previous question, it asked that they are generally made using GET. That's not correct. So they are generally made using post. That's a correct statement. The detailed data is sent in the request body. Again, as I mentioned, that the payload that we are sending along with the request, it must be minimal. I guess one of the option above question even says that. So yes, that is a wrong option in that case. So these were the two questions that were based on the lightweight API calls. I'll just keep this bar somewhere. Okay. So this was 10.1. If I talk about AQ 10.2, so we are going to discuss about webhooks here, as a 10.2 lecture itself is based on webhooks. So they are also called HTTP push API. So maybe if you would have gone through the slides or the lectures, you would be able to answer this question, or at least got this option. Yes, they are also referred to as HTTP push API. Remember, push API and HTTP push API, they both are different. Okay? If you're using HTTP with it, then it becomes different. Webhook responses should be asynchronous. We'll come on to that. It is a communication mechanism between two apps and servers. How many of you think that third option is a correct option?
Yes, sir, it's true.
Okay. So see, what generally happens in case of a webhook is that the communication is happening between two servers. in general I'm talking about, because what happens that you basically set up some triggers that if certain things happen, then what you need to do is you need to send a request to this endpoint. Now, of course, it is a system where you are basically setting up those triggers that which is looking after those events that you have subscribed to. And whenever that event occurs, what it does is it basically sends a request to whatever endpoint that you would have specified. Just like the GitHub example was demonstrated in the lectures. So here the communication is basically happening between two applications or servers instead of a browser or a server. Okay, so webhooks send request to a given URL in the application. That is also true. Now, if we come onto this option, that is webhook responses should be asynchronous. How many of you agree with this statement?
It shall be synchronous. Otherwise, the two servers will not be able to communicate in real time.
Exactly.
They need to wait. They need to wait for the response.
Exactly. So if you're saying that asynchronous, that means you need to bring the concept of some kind of queue, where the server would be pushing up some messages, right? And after that, they will be sent to their respective targets. But here, since we want the communication to be real time, so that's why we are saying that the webhooks must be synchronous. Okay. This option is already. Yeah, so which of the following implements webhook callers? So there are two things. One is webhook callers. The second is webhook receivers. What are webhook callers? Where we set up triggers, right? That when certain things happen, it needs to send a request to a given URL. So that is a webhook caller. A webhook receiver is where that request is going to be sent. That is known as webhook receiver. So what do you think that which of these are webhook callers?
So GitHub, I'm sure, but Stripe don't.
How many of you? Okay, you have not heard about Stripe, or you are
No,
not
I
sure?
haven't heard. Not sure. I haven't heard as well.
Anyone else who may have heard about Stripe?
No, sir.
Okay,
No,
have you
sir.
heard about Razorpay?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
What is Razorpay?
Sir, it is a payment gateway.
Exactly. Similarly, there is one product such named Stripe. That is also a kind of payment gateway that you can integrate with your application. Right? So it also implements webhook callers. Why? Because whenever a payment got failed, or whenever a payment is successful, it triggers webhooks. That means it sends request to some other place, and through which client is usually get informed about the payment failure or the payment being successful. So it does implement webhook, or it basically acts as a webhook caller. If we talk about GitHub and GitLab, so I guess GitHub was, or it was GitLab. Okay, I guess one of them was actually demonstrated in the lectures. Since they both are basically remote Git repositories, all of the features that they provide are mostly same if we leave out few things. So yes, they both implement webhook callers. So in that case, all of the above is the answer. Okay. So we shall move to the next category. Okay. Anyways, which of the below are true for WebSockets? Okay, so it provides real-time communication between applications. The entire communication happens over HTTP protocol. Please note this thing. Means happens over HTTP protocol. We are talking about WebSockets. Okay. The connection should be kept open between services. It provides one-way communication. Let us first discuss about the second option. That is, it uses HTTP protocol. Do you think that WebSockets uses HTTP protocol? Kindly note that it is a protocol in itself. WebSocket is itself a protocol. and it is built on top of TCP. So of course, the second option is definitely false. So since we are looking for true statements, okay, I'm not sure how many of you know about full duplex communication or half duplex communication. So what usually happens is that in half duplex, only one machine, or we can say one system can send messages at a time. But if we talk about full duplex, so both of the machines in the network can communicate with each other at any point of time. So WebSockets is generally used for achieving this full duplex communication. So what it does is it allows both of the machines to communicate with each other in real time. That means there is no restriction that at a particular time only one machine or one client can send a message to another. They both can communicate in real time. So the first option is correct. The second one has already been ruled out since it is mentioning about STB protocol. The third one is the connection should be kept open between services. Now this is a option or a question that you can answer yourselves. So what we are saying is that it provides real-time communication. In order to provide a real-time communication, what do you think? That should the connection be kept open, or should it be closed after each message is received or sent?
It should be kept open.
Should be kept open.
Should be open.
So it is again correct option. And fourth option, since we are saying that it is used to achieve full duplex communication, so of course fourth option becomes wrong. So which of the below are ways to perform communication between services? So WebSockets, okay, it allows communication. Polling is also some kind of mechanism through which a client makes a request to the server. That is also a kind of communication. And APIs, we all know that, of course, it allows a machine or even a human to interact with a server. So basically, all of these are somehow allowing us to do some communication between with the services. WebSocket. Okay, so this is some other question. Okay. So again, something true regarding WebSocket. So it creates a two-way communication between server and the client. The first option is absolutely correct. So since it is an MCQ, so of course all other options would be incorrect. So it creates one-way communication. That is of course not correct, and it uses HTTP protocol. Again, that's not true. So yeah, these were the three questions. Okay. Okay. Which of the below statements is true regarding polling? Okay, now if we talk about polling, so there are basically two types of polling. One is short polling, the other one is long polling. Now, if I'm saying that polling, what do you think? What I'm referring to? Am I referring to short polling or long polling? Short polling is also known as fixed interval polling.
So that will be short polling if we are referring to polling.
Exactly. So polling by default refers to short polling. If we need to mention about long polling, we need to mention the entire. So here we need to basically tell about the polling in general, or you can even say short polling. So the option should be self-explanatory if it talks about long polling. So if you talk about first option, it says fixed interval polling. So that itself is referring to polling or short polling is called long polling. So of course that is not correct. Fixed interval means short poll. We need to select true statements. Okay. So in a long poll, the connection is kept open. So here we are referring to long poll. That means long polling. So see what happens in both of these pollings is, if we talk about first short polling, so it is even a computer science concept that what happens is that okay, so whenever an operation needs to be performed, what it does is it may require the help of CPU. Okay, so what will happen is that the CPU will keep checking with the process that do you need my help? Do you need my help after certain intervals? Let's say after every 5 seconds, the CPU is going to a process and is asking that do you need any help from me, or is there anything that I can do for you? So what is happening is that the CPU is pinging the process after every 5 seconds. So that is basically what usually happens in a short-term polling, that a client makes a request to a server after every certain time period. Let's say we selected the time interval to be 5 seconds. So after every 5 seconds, the client is going to make a request to the server to check that if there is something. But what happens in case of a long polling is that the client will make a request to the server if server does not have anything to respond. The client is going to keep the connection open till the time the server has something to return as a response. Right? What I'm saying is that when a client makes a request to the server and the server has nothing to respond to the client would not close the connection and will ask the server after 5 seconds again. What will it do in long polling is it will keep the connection open till the time the server is ready to give back the response. Now, when the client gets back the response, that connection is closed. Now, when that connection gets open again, that depends on the client. It is not defined by long polling that the connection has to be set up immediately after you receive the response or something like that. So that depends on the client after it. There is one more concept in computer science which comes just opposite to this polling, that is interrupt. In interrupt, what happens is that you call the service which you require whenever you need it. Like I gave an example of CPU. A process needs a CPU. So CPU is not going to check again and again after every 5 seconds that do you need my help. Whenever the process needs it, the process will go to CPU that I need your help. Can you please help? These are some basic computer science concepts. So in this question, fixed interval polling is called long polling. That's not correct. In a long poll, the connection is kept open. Yes, correct. In fixed poll, the requests are sent at regular intervals. Yes, that's correct. In long poll, server resources are blocked. What do you think? If I'm talking about long polling, I'm saying that the connection is open. The client is engaged, the server is also engaged since the connection is still open. So do you think that the resources are blocked? Yes, of course. If the connection is
Yes,
open, of course, the resources are blocked. They are being used. So which of the following is not a push notification service? I guess all of you would be able to answer this question. RabbitMQ, it is basically a message queue, which is not a service, a push notification service. Yeah. Okay, so we have completed the activity-based questions for week 10. I shall move to the practice-based questions for this week. Okay. So now again, we are back to the concept of webhooks. Which of the following statements is true regarding webhooks? So a webhook is also known as REST API. A webhook is sometimes referred to as reverse API. A webhook is generally used to retrieve information from the server and rarely used to push information. A webhook uses HTTP protocol. So what do you think? Which options are correct?
so webhook is a push API, so the second option makes the sense. It's a reverse API.
So
why do
you think why we call it a reverse API?
Because we are pushing the content. Generally, we pull the content with the help of API.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. So in most of the cases, what happens is that someone exposes API endpoints so that other people can use those endpoints to fetch the information that they need. In most of the cases, the purpose is to give out the information. Right? Of course, means we have built so many applications, so many APIs through which we are also getting the data. We are accepting the post requests as well, through which the user is pushing some data to a database. That happens too. But in most of the cases, APIs are created to give out the information. Suppose I have some data and I want to share that data with the people or with only a small set of people. So what would I do is I would implement an API. I would give each one of them an API token, and I would tell them to access these API endpoints with their API token. This way, I'm not even giving my entire database to them. Right? I'm just giving the API endpoints where I can even keep some level of filters as well. Okay. So in that sense, the second option is correct. All right. What about the others? A webhook is also known as REST API. If we are calling it reverse API, the first option automatically becomes wrong. A webhook uses HTTP protocol. Yes, it does. Since we are saying that what a webhook is, whenever a certain thing happens, we are sending a request to a specified URL. So of course that follows client server architecture. So it uses HTTP protocol. So a webhook is generally used to retrieve information from the server and rarely used to push information. So again, that option is in support to the first option, where we are saying that a webhook is generally used to retrieve information. That is the use case of a REST API, right? Where we generally get some information, where a developer expose some endpoint so that other people can fetch the information from the data that I have. So this third option also becomes wrong in that sense. Okay, so which of the following tools can be used to debug webhooks? Remember, what are webhooks? Webhooks are just some requests that are being sent from one server, from one application to another. So how would you want to debug that? Of course, in case you want to debug that, you might need to see that what the response is, or what the headers are, or things like that. So what do you think, which all things can allow you doing such type of debugging that are mentioned in this question? Do you think curl can help you with it? See, curl can be used to make a network call. So it can,
Yes, sir.
it can tell you that what the response is, it can tell you what the response headers are. So that can be used for debugging. Okay. What about GraphQL? Can it help in any sense? No, GraphQL is basically something different. It is completely different from the context that we are basically referring to here. What is GraphQL? GraphQL is a query language that has nothing to do with the webhooks. Okay. What about insomnia? What is insomnia? Has anyone used insomnia before?
Yes, sir. We make API call using this.
Okay. Okay, so maybe a few of you may not have used insomnia before. So I'm sure you must have used Postman, or at least you would have heard the name of Postman. So insomnia is just an alternative for Postman. It provides you the similar kind of interface through which you can test your APIs or make some network calls. So these two things can be used in order to debug webhooks or even any network call. Okay, so which of the following statements is false regarding webhooks? So a webhook generally uses HTTP post request method. Webhooks are generally called by human clients. The response to the webhook should indicate the status code. The response to the webhook should have minimal content in the response body. So what do you think? Which of the options given here is wrong, is false?
Second one.
Webhooks are generally called by human clients. Yeah. So I guess a few minutes ago we discussed that webhooks, here the communication is happening between two applications or servers. Okay. So that's why webhooks it can happen. Of course, you can make a request to a certain URL or a UI or a endpoint that someone has exposed, but it generally happens via a different machine, a separate machine. So yeah, that's an incorrect option. Again, webhook generally uses HTTP post, so of course it does. Just like lightweight API calls, it uses post request method in most of the cases. And a webhook should basically indicate the status code. That should be good enough to identify whether the event that was triggered was successful or there was some kind of failure. The status code should be able to explain about the result. And well, it is not recommended to have a big payload in the webhook request. It is generally recommended to have you know very concise information, or even get rid of information if you can. Basically, what matters the most in webhook is that status code and maybe some minimal information if really needed. So yeah, that option is correct. Okay. So now we are talking about WebSocket. The connection between client and server is always open. Okay, it is true, since we are saying that it is used for achieving two-way communication. So, of course, the connection needs to be kept open in such case. The connection between client and server closes as soon as the client receives the response. That is, of course, a false option. WebSocket is a protocol layered over TCP. That's what we discussed. Yeah, that it is a protocol in itself that is built on top of this TCP protocol. So yeah, these two are the correct options. The second one is of course not correct, since it is contradictory to the first option. Okay, so here we are talking about push API. Remember, it is different from HTTP push API. HTTP push API and push API, they both are different. So what are the general use cases of using push API? Let me try to give you an example. Okay. For example, I hope most of you, or instead every one of you, would have used WhatsApp or might be using WhatsApp currently as well. So what happens is that when the WhatsApp is not active on your mobile phone and someone sends you a message, you still get a notification on top of your notification bar, right? That someone has sent you a message. The application is not active, right? This happens. This happens because it is a mobile application. Similarly, what happens in case of a web application is that there is some kind of mechanism. That mechanism is push API. That means even if the application is not active currently, it can be used to push some messages to that web application. It can be done via push API. So what it does is it again triggers some kind of events or push event that is generally sent to the client. But of course, in case you are sending some push notifications and the application is not active, there should be something on the client that is waiting for receiving such signals or such events. So that has to be done by having service workers on the client. The service workers must be up all the time in order to get those events, in order to get this functionality work. So this is what or this is where the push APIs are used the most. If you want, you can even go through the MTN page of push API. They explain it quite well. So you can even refer to that page as well. So it can push messages to the application only when the application is loaded on a user agent, even if the application is not loaded. Yes. So what I said is that even if the application is not active currently, then also it can be used to push the messages on a condition that the service workers must be available. They must be up. So application should have an active service worker. Yes. Application may not have an active service worker, that won't allow this push API to push those events in such case. The next question is again regarding polling. So since we are saying polling, that means we are going to refer to short polling here, not long polling. So polling is a mechanism in which client sends a request for data repeatedly after a fixed time interval. So since the option itself says polling, that means we have to think that we are talking about short polling here. So in short polling, yes, it does happen that a client sends repeated requests to the server after certain time intervals. So that's true. Response from the server can be empty. Response from the server can never be empty. What do you think? Which of the second or third options is true here? Any guesses?
Second one.
Why do you think that the responses can be empty? What is meant by responses being empty? Any idea, anyone? Okay, so let us first try to recall the difference between short and long polling. What we are saying in short polling is that the client is going to make repetitive request to the server after a fixed time interval. Okay. At the same time, we are saying that the long polling is what? In long polling, a client will send a request to the server and will keep the connection open till the time server has something to return to the client. Right? That means in long polling, we are saying the connection is being kept open till the server returns something. That means we are waiting for the server to return something. This is happening in case of a long polling. Okay. But in case of short polling, since we are not going to keep the connection open every time we send a request, we are going to close it and we'll send a request once again after a fixed time interval to check if server has to return something. So of course, it may happen that the server has nothing to return at that time, right? And maybe when the client will send the next request again after that fixed time interval, the server may have something that time to return. So in that cases, it is quite possible that the responses can be empty from the server in case of polling or short polling. So third option is contradictory of the second. So of course, that's not correct. So again, the question is based on webhooks. A webhook allows two different applications to communicate with each other. That is precisely what is happening in case of webhooks. A webhook notifies the client every time an event occurs. Yes, the client basically has to subscribe to some events on the webhook callers, right? Whenever that event will trigger, the webhook caller will send a request to the specified URL, whichever you would have specified as the webhook URL. Webhooks provide data to the client only when the client asks for the data. No. This is basically event based. This is trigger based. Which of the following is correct regarding the event driven architecture? So, okay. How many of you know about event driven architecture? Anyone who knows about the event driven architecture, or maybe you may have studied it from somewhere? All right, so maybe I can
No,
share
sir.
you a link. Yeah. Yes, please. Someone was saying something. I just interrupted.
No, sir. I was saying, please explain this.
Okay.
Yes.
So in event-driven architecture, the very first thing we are talking about is the key components. What are the key components in an event-driven architecture? And the first option itself discusses about those. So there are basically three types of components or three keys of components, not three types of components. One is event producer. The second one is event router, and the third one is event consumer. Now, their names may be self-explanatory, but you first need to understand that what each of these component does. So event producer, as the name suggests, it is going to produce some kind of event. An event for that is meant to be consumed by an event consumer. Right? Event producer produces an event keeping in mind that this event is to be consumed by what? Some event consumer, some kind of event consumer. But whatever the event is produced by this producer is not directly going to the consumer. There is a kind of broker that is sitting in between these two, that is handling all of that communication from the producer to the consumer, and that is what we call router, the event router. So what we generally do is that we do all of the filtering here in the router part. That means filtering can be like that which producers can send request to which consumers, or maybe if a producer is even allowed to send a request uh, to any consumer, such kind of things, maybe some kind of business logic. Right? So these type of things can be put inside the event router what it is going to do is it is going to filter the events based on the criteria that are defined. And once the events which satisfy those criteria, they will be directed to what? They will be directed to event consumer. So this is how this cycle works. An event producer is going to produce something that is going to be filtered and checked by event router. And once it satisfies the requirement, it is going to be directed to event consumer. So with that in mind, the first option is definitely a correct option, since there are three key components in this architecture. The second option says that event producer publish messages to the event router. That's correct. Because what we discussed was that whatever events have been produced by the producer, they are not directly going to consumer. There is someone who is sitting in between these two as a broker. So that is what we call event router. Now every event producer publish events directly to the event consumer. That's not correct. And event router publish the messages to the event consumer. That is correct. Because since all of the filtering is being done by the router, it is the one which is going to direct or send those events to the consumers. Okay. All right. So I guess we have covered all of the activity and practice based questions for week 10. So let me know if you guys have any doubts so far till now.
No, sir.
Okay. So if there are no doubts, we shall move to the next week, that is week 11. So week 11 is about performance measurement and caching. All right. So we'll start with the activity based questions. All right. So which of the following does not come under the performance measures of a web application? So how do you basically measure the performance of a web application? The options are given here. When would you say that your application is performing quite well, really well? Which factors would you consider while making such decision?
The speed and scaling.
The styling won't be a part of that measurement, is it?
Yes, sir.
Exactly, it won't be. Since you're talking about the performance, that how your application behaves under load, or when many clients try to send a request simultaneously to your server, to your application, how your application behaves in such cases. So that is what we are talking about here. So speed and scaling are those things which we'll be keeping in our mind while doing so. So, okay, the question is basically asking for does not. So in that case, the styling would be the option, the correct answer. Which of the following is our contributing factors for speed for a web application? So again, how would you define that whether a web application is performing well? Again, this is indirectly talking about the performance. So you need to keep in mind that what type of network type you are using. It may be mobile data, it may be broadband. The speed might be low, the speed might be high. That is one of the factor. The number of requests, again, how your application behaves under load, and the size of responses. Of course, if the size of the responses that your application is sending to each request, if it is high, of course, it is going to impact on your application performance if it is getting too many requests in a given second. So all of the above is basically the answer to this question. Which of the following are the advantages of caching? So caching helps in responding to the repeated requests without processing the request operation again. Okay. Caching reduces the load on the origin server. The caching can be done. All right. So the first option says that what is happening is that, let's say there are three clients, client A, client B, and client C. What happens is that a client A sends a request to an endpoint, let's say slash show list or some kind of endpoint or which is going to list all of the products, let's say, which the web application has in the database. Let's say list products, that endpoint. Now, what is going to happen is if you have implemented caching, when the first request hits the origin server, whatever the response has been returned, that would be cached as well, in some reverse proxy. So what will happen is that when client B or client C are going to make that request once again to the same web application, to the same endpoint that, give me the list of all of the products that this application has. So instead of hitting the origin server once again, instead of querying your database once again, what will happen is that those two requests would be served from the cache. That means cache already has the response to those requests. So that is how caching works. And of course, it is having this advantage because you don't need to hit the origin server or query your database again and again for every same request or identical request. Caching reduces the load on origin server. That's exactly what is happening. The caching can be done at various levels. Of course, it is possible. You can do caching probably at the browser level itself, right? You can do it at the reverse proxy level. You can do it even at database levels. So of course, it can be done at multiple levels. So all of the options are basically correct here. So which of the following are the contributing factors of speed of the website? I guess it is the same question as that of second. So broadband speed, of course, the type of network you are using, whether it is slow or fast, that also is a contributing factor. Size of the responses, I guess we have already discussed. So this question is just a copy of that. Distance of user from the server. I guess that's a new option. Okay. So of course, if the server and users are located far apart, so the latency involved would be high as compared to when users and clients are sitting nearby. In that case, the latency would be quite less. But if they are far apart from each other, the latency is going to be high and it is going to affect the speed of the web application because the request would be delayed by full margin. Yeah, all of the above would be the answer again. Okay. So which of the following metric are used for performance measurement in Lighthouse? So in Lighthouse, there are certain metrics through which your application or your web application is basically evaluated. So one of those things or a few of those things are listed as options in this question. One is first contentful paint. Does anyone know what this first contentful paint is?
Time taken to render the first color, we can say. Contentful
First color, is it?
Color. Some object which is appearing completely.
First content.
Correct. Yeah. So whenever a page is loaded, basically the time required to display the first component of that page. Now what happens is that if I load this page, so it may happen that this bar may come up and this thing may take some extra time to get loaded. Okay. So basically if I talk about first contentful paint for this web page, so basically the time that is required to show this, to display this bar here on this web page. That means to display the very first thing on the web page. That is the first contentful paint. Similarly, what is largest contentful paint? So I hope if you have understood first contentful, the largest should be very trivial for you to answer.
The entire page. Time taken to load entire page.
We're talking about largest.
The largest component.
Exactly, the largest component. So, it might be a paragraph which is having a lot of text or maybe some kind of encoding that is taking some time in order to be displayed. It may be a image that requires to make a request to some other origin to fetch that image, some kind of those things. Okay, so which is going to take the maximum time. So yeah, of course, the largest component, of course, it can be said that it is going to take the maximum time, but may not be true in each and every case. Speed index. So does anybody know Anybody know what is speed index?
So time taken to render the page completely, entire page.
Exactly. So this is what we call the speed index. That means when I reload this page, so what will happen is few things would be displayed first, and this is still fetching the data in order to get the questions that are to be displayed here. So once all of the questions, all of the content on that page is finally displayed, that's where we will be considering the speed index. So if I talk about which of the following metrics that are given are used for performance measurement in Lighthouse. So all of them contributes to the Lighthouse report. So all of the above is precisely the answer. So what does the total blocking time metric represent? Can someone tell what is total blocking time?
The time for which there is no response.
Okay. So instead, before reading about total blocking time, or instead before understanding this, you should probably understand what is time to interactive is. Yeah, this question. So here, what we are asking is, what does time to interactive metric represent in Lighthouse? So what it does is, it basically represents the time that is required to make the page interactive. Now, what do I mean by such thing is that how do I decide that whether the page is interactive or not? Let's say I am given this web page on my browser, but I am not able to click anywhere. For example, I can click here, I can click here in order to open something. So this, what I can say is that now this page is interactive, because if I'm clicking something, there is some response that is happening against that event that I triggered. So this is what we can call basically interactiveness. So it is basically the time that is required to for a page to become interactive, right? Because there might be a case when this page is fully loaded up and I'm clicking on this calc button, but nothing is happening. That means the JavaScript is probably still loading. The JavaScript has not entirely loaded. So it might be the case. So yeah, time to interactive is that the time required for a page to become interactive. That means to download all of the scripts till that time. So to show something on the screen for the page to be interactive. Yeah. So the third option is the correct option for time to interactive. Now, once we have understood time to interactive, we should be able to answer what total blocking time is. So remember, in total blocking time, we are going to start from the first contentful paint. That means when this event has occurred, that means when the first element on the DOM has been mounted or has been loaded. This is where the time starts from, and this time ends where? This time ends when the time to interactive ends. So remember, the time to interactive starts when you make a request, but total blocking time starts when the first contentful paint event is triggered. Okay, so this is basically the difference. Or maybe you can also go through one web page which is going to tell you about all of these things. Okay, so yeah, these are all of the parameters that are listed here. So let me open total blocking time. So it says that TBT measures the total amount of time that a page is blocked from responding to user input such as mouse clicks, screen taps, or keyboard press. Sum of all periods between FCP. Yeah. So this is basically what is giving you the precise definition, that sum of all time periods between FCP. FCP means first contentful paint and time to interactive. Okay. So this is what we call the total blocking time. So this is what the total blocking time is. Similarly, speed index, as we have already answered, it is basically time required to complete the entire page. Okay, the first option itself, time taken to render the page completely. Time to interactive, we have already answered that the time which is required to make the page interactive. Okay, so if we talk about accessibility, what does accessibility mean? How much the website adheres to the accessibility guidelines of web content. how optimized the website is for search engines. We are not talking about search optimization here. So second option is not correct. How well the website is designed in terms of best practices, that has very little to do with the accessibility. So the first option is the best suited option here. That means how much your website adheres to the principles that are defined for accessibility. Similarly, the next question, search engine optimization. So search engine optimization is going to be, yeah, the second. Okay, I guess the options are same. Yes, so now this time the second option is going to be correct. How optimized the website is for search engines. That is search optimization. Right? How your application is being ranked when a user hits certain keyword or types certain keyword to search something. That is what search engine optimization is. So load on the server is measured in terms of number of requests received per second to the server, number of requests sent per second by a specific client. So of course the answer is first one. We need to consider all of the requests that a server is receiving, not only from a specific client. The primary job of a load balancer is to route the client's request to the servers capable of fulfilling those requests, to send a response to the request by a client, to serve the static content to the client. What do you think? What is the primary job of a load balancer?
First option, sir.
The first option.
Of course, it is the first option. The load balancer is generally used so that you can distribute the load among multiple servers in your. Okay. All right. What happened? Okay, I guess I selected wrong option. So total blocking time is yeah, for which the browser is frozen. All right, so we'll be taking a short break here of 2 minutes. I'll be back in just next 2 minutes. So I'm back. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
Thanks. Okay, so what we have done, we have completed AQ 11.1. So these were the set of activity questions for this week. Now we'll move to the practice-based questions for this week 11. Okay. So what does Lighthouse tool do? So it loads a page and resources while monitoring time taken. Yes, it does. Of course, means if you need to generate a report for a kind of web application to see how it behaves, so you would definitely need to send some request in order to assess that or in order to gauge how is it working. So that is what is happening in a Lighthouse tool. It inserts dummy data to the website database while monitoring time taken. It can emulate analysis for both mobile and desktop. What do you think about the second option? That does Lighthouse will also insert some dummy data to your database in order to find out the performance? What do you think?
Actually, not, sir.
Of course, it cannot. Yeah, it does not even. All right, so it does not do anything with the database. The third option says that it can emulate the analysis for both mobile. That means how the performance would be on a mobile phone or on a desktop and on a desktop. Do you think that it does allow to do that performance analysis for both of these devices, for desktop as well as for mobile?
Yes, sir. Index.
So maybe if I open Lighthouse. So here you are able to see that what all are the contributing factors, and here you are able to see the devices for which I need to perform the analysis. So I can even select that should I do it for a mobile phone or a desktop. So yes, it can. So which of the following factors contribute to the weighted average score computed by Lighthouse tool? So we just saw that there are 5 things. Performance, inside performance, there are quite a lot of things. Accessibility, again, best practices, SEO, and PWA. These 5 things are what Lighthouse is trying to evaluate. So performance was there, accessibility was there, best practices was there, security was not there. So except security, everything else would be correct for this option for this question. Okay, so which of the following categories come under web applications of static nature? What do you think? Which of these options is static, or probably are static? Static text page, as the name itself says, of course, it would be static. What about an LMS? Does anyone know what an LMS is?
No idea, sir. Can you please?
So what I'm currently using is an LMS in itself. I'm using Seek, and it is basically a learning management system. So this
So
itself is an
that
LMS.
is the line.
So that is not static.
Static. Yes.
So blog excluding likes and comment section. So see, here we have specifically said that you have to exclude the likes and comment section. So how do you consider a blog to be? A blog is something, or it is basically an article that is written by someone, right? Now, when you are reading that blog, the content is going to remain same for you, right? Whatever content or whatever article you are using in a blog, that is going to remain same for every user, whoever is reading that. So that's why we have excluded the likes or comment section, because they may change with the time or maybe sometimes depend on user to user. So this is also an example of a static nature application, because the content is static, that is not changing very frequently. LMS, of course, you all are aware that, okay, probably I'll discuss it. Okay, this is already available here. So if we talk about next option, next question, so it asks us to select an example, which is a dynamic web application. So Wikipedia, it serves almost static content. It may have a few dynamic fields here and there, maybe for advertisement or for some other kind of article links, but most of the things are static. If I'm going to study or read about IIT Madras on Wikipedia, the content that I'm reading is going to be identical with what you get. MDN, again, if I open, let's say, a fetch API page on MDN, so what I'm reading is, of course, going to be the same that what you are going to get when you will hit that URL. Star.github.io. Okay, so what do you think that star.github.io? Is it a static application or is it a dynamic application? See, if you are hosting something on github.io, this feature is known as GitHub Pages, and this is a static feature, or probably what you can say is that this allows a user to host a static website. That means any application that consists of maybe some simple JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. That is what you can do on github.io. Right? So see, if I have a page, say, if I have a page, say abhishekpod.github.io, so if you are going to access this URL, it is going to be same for you as well. Right? The content is not going to differ when I am making a request to it or when you are making a request. Okay, the request is going, the content is going to be the same. So this star.github.io is again not an example of a dynamic web application, but when it comes to the C, of course, that is an LMS, and we have specifically specified the URL to be this. That means the URL for this course. Why do you think that this LMS or this URL is dynamic in nature?
So there are assignments we submit, we get score.
Okay.
Evaluation is there.
It will be different for everybody.
Exactly, because you are basically logging in with your credentials. Someone else is logging in with different credentials. They have a different assignment score. You have a different assignment score. They might be enrolled in some different courses. Well, since we are talking about a specific course, so courses won't come in. But yeah, scores and these things would definitely be different. So yeah, this is an example of a dynamic web application. All right. So suppose you have recently launched a new product and have published a website for the same, assuming that the traffic to the website is going to increase drastically in the coming future. Which of the following scaling would be better in a long term? Okay, what do you think? Which type of scaling should you be going for in the scenario that is explained in this question?
So for long run, we should be using, I think, horizontal scaling.
Correct. So what is the difference between the two?
So in horizontal scaling, we basically add new machines, and in vertical scaling, we upgrade our one machine.
Exactly. What is happening is, let's say I have just hosted my application. I have just hosted it. I am not expecting too much traffic on it right away. So what I have done is I have just taken one machine, which is having, let's say, 8 GB of RAM and some configuration. But what happens is, suddenly the traffic on my application grows as my business is growing. So what happens is that I need to basically scale up my system because it is taking, too long for the users to access my application, and it is making the user experience quite bad. So instead, what I could do is I could instead upgrade the RAM of my current system, of my current server to, let's say, 16 GB or something, even more than that. But again, after reaching a certain point, if the traffic is still going up, I need to again, upgrade my machine from 16 GB to some, higher configuration machine. So instead of doing that, what I could do is I could instead distribute my load among multiple machines, right? Let's say now what I have is, instead of having a machine with 16 GB of RAM, I am having two different machines, right? Now the load is getting distributed. So it is definitely going to be an advantage. It is definitely going to be beneficial for me in long run, because I don't need to, worry about the traffic again and again. But if I'll go for vertical scaling, if I'll just try to upgrade a single machine, I will have to look after it again after a few days or probably months. So horizontal scaling would definitely be a best choice in case of a long run. Okay, so which of the following statements is true regarding load balancers? So a load balancer generally responds with an HTML response to the client for a given request. What do you think? I guess in one of the questions we discussed that the primary role of a load balancer is to direct a request to one of the appropriate servers which can handle and respond to that request. So that option is saying something else. Of course, that is not a correct option. The first one. Every load balancer must follow a weighted round robin algorithm to do load balancing. As you might be aware that if you need to do load balancing, you need to, at least choose one of the algorithms. For example, round robin or this weighted round robin or least connections or things like that. So it is not mandatory at all for you to go with weighted round robin. You can even go for any other algorithm that you might like. So maybe if we talk about a few of those, what happens in weighted round robin is, or instead you should understand what round robin is. Let's say you have 3 servers. So what is going to happen is this load balancer, let's say, has gotten 10 requests. So what will it do is it will send the first request to server A, second to B, third to C, 4 to back A again, fifth to B, sixth to C, then 7 to A, 8 to B, 9 to C, and 10th one to A. Right? So this is how the simple round robin algorithm is going to work. In case you are using weighted round robin, so what is happening is you are assigning some kind of weight to a server. So let's say again you have 3 servers, A, B, C, and the weight that you have assigned to server A is 3. You have the weight you have assigned to server B is 4, and for C it is 2. So the very first 3 requests that the load balancer is going to get, they all are going to be transferred to server A only, because the weight assigned to that server is 3. So it is going to get the 3 requests. Similarly, the next 4 requests would be transferred to, or would be directed to server B, since the weight assigned is 4. And for server C, whatever the weight is assigned, the number of requests will go to server C, and after that it will go back to A again. Similarly, there is one more, I guess, least connections. So it basically depends on which server is having the least number of connections currently. Accordingly, the request will be directed from the load server to that particular server. So there are so many algorithms. If you want, you can probably explore those. So yeah, that option is ultimately not correct. The function of a load balancer is just to forward the request to the server. That is precisely what a load balancer does, nothing else. Okay. So which of the following statements are true? So reverse proxies are used to protect the client from the outside world. What do you think about this option? Reverse proxies are used to protect the client from the outside world. Any idea?
Proxy is a copy of server. A reverse proxy.
See, proxy is something that protects client, and reverse proxy is something that protects server.
Okay.
Okay. So here it is saying reverse proxy protects the client. That is not correct. It basically protects the server. It acts as a proxy for the outside world, so that the server is not located by the external request. Right? If there is any filtering or any kind of blacklisting, whitelisting is to be done, that would happen at this level, reverse proxy level. Okay, so that is not a correct option. A load balancer is not required if there is only one server. What do you think?
True.
It is true, of course. The primary purpose of using a load balancer is to distribute the load in case you are having multiple servers. If there is only one server, the load balancer is always going to send the request to that particular server. So there is no point of using a load balancer in such case. Reverse proxy servers can cache the response based on the request. That is one of the advantages of having reverse proxy as well. The first advantage we already discussed, with the help of first option, that it is used to protect the server from the outside world, from the external request, and can be used to for the purpose of filtering the request. The second advantage can be that you can even apply caching at reverse proxy level. So the correct option, second and third. The first option is not correct. Which of the following statement is correct regarding HTTP pipelining? So see, what happens in a HTTP model is that a client makes a request first, gets a response. After getting the response, again makes a request, waits for a response for that request. After getting the response, then makes the request again, and this cycle goes on. But in case of pipelining, what happens is that you don't generally wait for responses for the request that you have sent previously. You send continuous request, right? And then you just wait for their responses. So here you are not actually waiting for the responses for the previous request to send the next request. This is what happens in HTTP pipeline. So it allows client to send multiple requests to the server over a single TCP connection without waiting for their response. Exactly, that is what is happening here. It allows the client to send only one request to the server. No, that is not true. It allows client to send multiple requests to the server over a single TCP, but wait for the response for the request. No. So as we have discussed that client can send multiple requests repeatedly without waiting for the responses of the previous request. So what does the first contentful paint metric represent in Lighthouse? I'm not sure if we have already discussed that question, but I guess we already have. So it is basically time taken to show something for the page to be interactive for which browser is frozen. So the second option is the most relevant here. That means to show something. Something means whatever displays on the screen for the very first time. So which of the following is correct regarding proxy? Remember we discussed that proxy is used to protect the client from the outside world, and reverse proxy is for the server. Okay, so proxy this time we are talking about client. It is the intermediary between server and client. Of course, it is going to be because the client is basically going to send the request to proxy, and the proxy is going to request the server on the behalf of the client. It routes the client's request to the server capable of fulfilling those requests exactly. Proxies can help with content distribution. No. Proxies are not going to help you with the content distribution. So yeah, the main purpose of proxy is just to protect the client from the outside world. What happened?
So the last one.
Yeah, there seems to be some issue with this question. The second option should be the correct one.
Yeah, I think the CDN is like kind of proxy. That's why this option is correct.
Okay, yeah, if you consider proxy to be a CDN, then yes.
Yeah, CDN does the exit send.
Okay, in that case, yes, it can be considered to be a true option.
And the second option, it routes the client request to the server capable of fulfilling those requests. I mean, this is the like definition of load balancer. I mean, this can be possible.
Okay, yeah, I agree. Request to the server is capable of fulfilling those requests. All right, yeah, correct. That could be a load balancer. So a proxy would basically send a request to the load balancer that is in place, and the load balancer will decide that which server is to be hit. Okay, yeah. So we have completed discussing the practice questions as well. Does anybody has any doubt so far with whatever we have discussed?
So can we discuss regarding project?
Yeah, may I know what shall I discuss?
No, not much in detail, but regarding the backend specifically, do we need to go for API, completely designing of API?
Yeah, of course, means you need to
Actually,
write
you
some
said
API.
yes. Yeah. But like we did throughout the session using Flask API as a server and then front end here, the same thing, no?
Yeah, exactly. So what you need to have is you need to have an API in place, and you should be using fetch request in the lifecycle hooks of your view components. So in the mounted hook or in the created hook to make fetch request at every page to fetch the data dynamically and update the content.
Okay, sir.
For backend jobs, there are basically three types of job, if I'm not wrong. One is going to be the daily reminders. So this is again going to be a scheduled job. This is not a user triggered job. So you need to set up a cron for this. The other one is monthly report. So again, you need to set up a cron for this because this is a again scheduled job. The other jobs. Okay, yeah, there is one export import feature, I guess. So there is one of them that is mandatory. I guess import is mandatory or export is mandatory. Maybe you can just refer to the problem statement once. One of them is mandatory. So whichever is mandatory, you can probably create a job for that. Instead of doing it in synchronous mode, you could probably delegate or just dispatch it to yourself. It will do the rest.
Okay, sir.
So I'm not. I guess the backend jobs are not going to be complex in any sense. They are quite easy. If you know that how the logic is to be written, for example, I guess in one of the sessions we discussed that how you can send webhooks to the Google chats. Right? We did it using we did it as a user trigger job. That means when we hit an endpoint, then it would be sent to that Google chat space, the webhook URL of which is configured in our program. The same can be done as a scheduled job, so it is quite simple. I don't think you are going to face any problem there. Similarly, if you can write the logic of creating users performance report, I don't think you are going to face any trouble there. What you need to do is you just need to fetch all of the users that are currently present in your database. Instead of creating a single job for creating all of the reports, what you should be doing is create one job for fetching all of the users. And once you have fetched all of the users, dispatch a separate job for each of them to generate a report. So what will you do is, if you will do everything in a single job, what you need to do is you need to put a for loop that first you will be creating a report for A user, then B user, then C user, then D user, storing it somewhere. And once all of those process report generation is done, then then you will be proceeding with sending those reports via emails or whatever you are trying to do. But if you will try to dispatch it using Celery, so what will happen is that let's say if there are 4 workers available, the 4 reports can be generated simultaneously. But if you will do it using for loop, the first needs to be generated first. Only after that, the second would start its generation. But if you will delegate or dispatch it as a separate job, then 4 or whatever number of workers are present in your Celery system, those many number of reports can be generated simultaneously. This is one of the way through which you can improve the performance.
Yes, sir.
Is there anything else that you think is difficult to implement in the project? Apart from that, it is mainly the CRUD operations. I guess you have already done those CRUD operations in your MAD one, so don't think
Yes,
it would
sir.
be a difficult task.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So I'll just stop sharing my screen. Yeah, in case you guys have any issues with respect to the project, please come back to us. Apart from that, we also recommend you to go through that guidelines document that is published on the project portal. Let us know in case of any queries with respect to that guidelines document as well. So I'm not sure if you are aware, but basically a separate discourse or a course is created on discourse for project purpose for both MAD 1 and MAD 2. So if you have any project specific query, you can post it in the relevant course category. All right. Okay, so are there any questions?
No, sir.
Okay. So if there are no more questions, I guess we can formally close this session.
Sure, sir.
Okay, sir.
All right. So thank you all for attending this session, for coming in this session with us. Please let us know again in case of any queries with respect to the project, as the course is about to end. And I'm hoping that the concepts that are required for you to implement the project have been discussed in the live sessions in much details. So please let us know in case you feel any difficulty in implementing any of this. All right. So
Yes,
in that case, yeah, once again, thank you all. So
Thank
we
you,
are
sir.
closing this session. So have a good night.
Good night,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank-
Good night.